We are recording. Welcome, everyone. Prince and Makers Book Club. We are live from Asheville, North Carolina, where I am, and Johannesburg, South Africa, where Jill and Sbongiseni and Kimberly are. And you guys are in the David Krut Workshop there in the Mabenang district in Johannesburg. And you've been in this studio now since
2010.
2010. I was going to say 2011. And so it's a well-worn in space. And I think in conversations past, Jill, we've talked about how this space was, what, 3 times the previous space, and it felt small in about a week. So your artists seem to fill up the space as quickly as we can. And just to give everybody kind of an idea, we will be going between this studio, the David Krut Workshop, and the Arts on Main building complex, and William's studio across the courtyard, because what you're working on is so big, you need 2 studio spaces to do it. So there's nothing small or anything for the faint of heart. So I just want to turn it over to you guys first. And Jill, if you want to introduce everybody and give a little bit of context of what we're seeing behind you in the studio we're in right now, that would be great.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jillian Ross, and this is Kim, the Loggenberg Tim, which is new, the double barrel hyphens, and Sbongiseni Khulu behind me. Hello. We've all been working together for 10 years? 10 years.
I've only been here 8 years.
10 years.
8 years. I've only been here 8 years. Yeah.
Oh, we lost Phil.
No,
he's right. Oh, yes. Okay. So we feel like we've been working together maybe much longer. I've had the pleasure of working in this studio here at Arts on Main since 2010. And we are literally located right in downtown Johannesburg, right next to William's Theatre and Sculpture Studio. And when David Krut Workshop moved from kind of a suburban area downtown here next to William's studio, the work just very, very quickly, actually. I think our second project with William was a big cat made of 6 different pieces, overlapping sheets of paper, because we finally had space. As Phil says, we were like a third of the size. And so over the course of the first few years here working at Arts on Main, we kind of grew to figure out how to work in big print. And then Kim prints some of the biggest plates always, so does Sbongiseni. So over the course, I guess, of having this big studio space, we not only expanded and broadened William's works, but all of the works for a number of different artists. And I think the nicest part is, I think many of us kind of are aware of, is that when you have the room to do something and you show people what can be done, other people kind of naturally respond to it and naturally want to work in those same kind of veins. And that's, I guess, when we keep not pushing, but creating these big works with William are fun. There's so many different parts, so many different people involved in those parts. Kim's the master wiper of all of these plates, as you know, Phil has mentioned also so many times.
Prince better than I do. Let's make it clear.
Sbongiseni has it too. He just does less of it sometimes, but not always. And then now more and more, there are 6 printers actually in here. So it's the 3 of us. And then there is also Sarah Judge, Roxy Kaczmarek, and Jessie Shepston. So together we have, for the last 4 weeks, been working on a project that is not only 1 big print, but 2. And, you know, very naturally, that it just, what we've done is we're moving on from a project that we did last year that is also, it's bigger than this one in scale, but combines photogravure, direct gravure, hand-painted sheets of paper, text, multiple layered, shinkale, collage. And so we're stepping into the next vein of that kind of headspace. So I don't know where else kind of I want to let these guys talk as well.
Yeah, I love that. So
You
I
need
do
to
want
ask
to point out to everybody that there might be some internet disruptions. The internet isn't always great, and soon we will transition over to William's studio, and so we'll have a little bit of that. So bear with any slight delays or internet dysfunction that we might have for this. For me, it's wonderful to see you guys in this capacity, because having been part of the process of helping select this studio with David back in 2009, maybe, when this building was a burned out shell of a building. And David and I were there in the middle of the night with flashlights climbing over burned out cars and old mattresses. And when we were walking through, you know, we picked this particular space for the studio, and in large part just because of the light and the windows and its proximity to William, and just knowing that there would be this potential for it to have all of this crossover, to be a hub. And I think you guys have worn into that space in such a way that it has become that hub that was originally imagined, and more so, and so much more. This, just to give the audience who hasn't been there an idea of the space, it's flexible and a big portion of it. Tables can be moved. William works so big, and some of the artists do as well, that it requires lots of flat space and lots of wall space. And so kind of the production area is off to one side as far as the presses, and plating tank, and acid baths and things. And as most printers, we get stuck into the tiniest corner of the studio where all the other stuff happens in the rest of the space. And so a lot of what you all will feel or see, we'll do a little quick tour of the space, but what you'll feel or see in the space is just kind of how everybody walks around. So I was wondering, Jill, if you could take a moment right now to kind of walk us around the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. The works that are behind us, also, if we stand up, you'll be able to see how much bigger they are if we stand next to them. Happily, we can take you around. And also,
Sbongiseni is tall. I want to point that out.
Sbongiseni is tall, yeah.
He's a tall man.
Yeah, that's often the case. So this is where you walk in. So we're in the courtyard, just in a courtyard space with a beautiful garden. And in the garden, there's a restaurant and tables where everyone sits down. And then you walk in, and there's a small bookstore that has now been converted into extra workshop space, which we had always, Phil, in the planning, had always tried. So now we have an extra small workshop space there, and another one there, actually. So all the presses from 2 locations have been moved down here. And then we have one of the most beautiful tables. And this is so we work in this space most of the time. And we lay everything out here for William to do all the hand painting. And this is kind of the spontaneous, right? Yeah. Ever-changing kind of section.
And it helps that everything's on wheels. So we just move it around whenever we see fit.
Yeah, and that's Phil. Thank you.
Every artist has their own needs, and you basically need to reset the studio every time a different person comes in to what needs they have. So
yeah. So here too, you can just we'll show you just the space. Every surface right now is full. It's occupied. We are working in color. So we are just testing as many of the green palettes. William's been working on a series of drawings that actually are done on green painted sheets of paper. Has everything to do with a project he calls The Great Yes and the Great No. So it's a series of junglescapes or gardens. And many of these drawings are from his own garden, actually. So a lot of people have said, hey, we recognize this space because it's William's home.
Right.
So there's the etching area. It's over here in the corner. And then the editioning section is here, and another printing press.
And lots of proofs.
And lots of proofs. We have everything up because William's also at the Center for the Less Good Idea. Their performance season is 5 days long, twice a year, and it's happening this weekend as well.
So you can kind of for the audience that William's primary method of making images, cutting images, and recombining, a lot of what you're seeing on the tables there is the working process. I mean, William was just in the studio when we were doing our test, looking at proofs, and so they're working on changing colors, changing papers, figuring out what's going to go where. Things are being pinned so they can be collated, and so there's a lot of flurry of work that happens over this month period that you guys are doing this part of this project to figure it out, and then it'll take probably a year, maybe a little more, to actually finish it. And just in case anybody wants to know, that's how you decide what color to use. So when someone says, what green should it be? Well, you try 15, 20, 30 different greens until it feels just right.
I think that's the hardest part to explain. Am I right? Like, and we're using the same green in this work here. I'm sorry, it's always the way in which you have to point, right? But this work here as we are in that work down there. So it's just that we're using different pieces of paper. And because so we're just having fun.
Yeah.
With as many possible parts that we could think of. Sorry.
Also, like a fun little experiment, like finding that when you print the same ink on a different color paper, it gives you a different hue, a different opacity, all those kind of things, and how it affects the feel of the image. It's quite rare.
And then it's also, you know, how William's going to want to collage what, because I think if everyone, you want to point back to the image, Jill, I mean, there's a lot of different plates being used and that are starting to be put together. And there's the way you print the plate, or maybe how you alter it, or what paper you print it on can make one part of the image stand out more than another. It's how you overlap and where. It's, do you want a seamless visual overlap, or do you want a disjointedness? You know, Williams often likes the ability to articulate the parts of the print like you would a puppet.
Yeah. And so it's also mixed in with a lot of hand painted sheets of paper. So we're just getting the palette actually. So we've spent a lot of time with these palettes now trying to figure it out. And so Sbongiseni is going to show you the project from last year so that it just kind of contextualizes why or how we've added on to what was created as kind of this series of playing with photogravure and direct gravure, and in this case this year with polymer plates. So
I want to mention for people who don't know, photogravure is an antique photo process of putting a photographically generated image etched into a copper plate so it can be printed. Direct gravure is the process of using a drawn image, usually on a translucent or transparent material, to expose that photographically to a copper plate to be wiped and printed. And polymer plate is a more modern technological version of the photogravure process. So it allows William to draw and print and make plates. So the difference between the photogravure and the polymer plates is the photogravure is done on copper and polymer is a plastic essentially. So William can go back into the copper plates to rework those, whereas the polymer plates you cannot. So that's some of the basic differences of what they're using. And just to point out that he had originally started doing photogravure many years ago with Randy Hemminghouse, that David had brought Randy Hemminghouse to South Africa to work with William on a series of images. And so this has been picked back up with Jill since the pandemic started. So, all right, that's enough of me talking.
So these guys have we create these acetates because everything's made out of multiple pieces of paper. We have to make sure that there's a map so that we can put them back together in the same way, and also two, so that
Sorry, Jill, you accidentally just got muted.
yeah, okay.
Sorry.
What you heard.
You can just repeat.
Okay. So they've just moved the acetate, and that has everything. We make the acetate so that there's a registration so that we can remake this editioned work again and again, but also so that if a framing company needs these registrations, it's possible. We're also putting pins through all of these works, which, as we all kind of know, people hesitate in doing that themselves. So we pre-pin the work so that there's holes in the work that exist. So a framer, again, can put the work in its proper place with the guides. So not only is printing, hand painting, then there's the assembly. And these guys have been working on this now for
year and a half. Feels long, but it's not. It's a year and a half. Yeah, because you get so
I think
lost.
it's a year.
Yeah, you get so lost in the additioning and the putting it together that you get tunnel vision and you lose all sense of space and time. And then when you come out of it, you're like, oh, it's only been a year. Crazy. Yeah, but you also come out of it with something that you're proud of. I'm like, okay, cool, we did that. That's cool. That's cool. So as Joe was saying about the acetates and how it forms as a map for the framer to put it all together, how we try to simplify that also is in likening this to a previous project that William did, which is Scribble Cats, and where he drew onto the prints to create a sense of registration that didn't need an acetate. So now, instead of giving this acetate to our framer every time, all he need to do is line up those red lines, which were originally drawn by William.
So they get registration marks, much like William creates on the majority of his drawings.
Yes.
In red pencil, pencil crayon. We've never printed the red. It never works in quite the same way.
Different intensity that he didn't like and flattened the mark. It was, yeah, not quite as alluring as the hand drawn and hand drawn. Yeah.
And the Scribble Cat was hand painted with a Sennelier ink wash a long time ago, because it's also Williams would rather, instead of moving through something that's enormously technical, he'd rather actually have the spontaneity in the mark. And that's what you're still achieving through, if you just show them maybe some of the smaller parts.
Which ones?
I don't know if we can zoom in sometimes. Can you see
Several.
on the screen?
Maybe the difference between the collage
Yeah.
and the sheen
So,
I'm
I
pointing
guess
the right
piggybacking off of Triumphs and Laments, where every piece on that section, on that project was on a hard backing and more or less tacked on with pins. This is the only one that kind of pays reference to that, whereas everything else is now sheen collared or collage on and such, that creates a much more effortless transition for the framers again to kind of put it together. Because if you'd imagine having up to 70 plus pieces that you have to now use a map to put together after you've already paid an exorbitant amount of money to get this artwork, and if something goes wrong, it's on you. That's not something you want.
Do you guys, will you hold one up maybe? Can you guys see it well enough?
We can, yeah. I mean, I think I want to also point out, I mean, they may cost a lot, but we're also talking 6 people a year and a half to make it. So
With
that's a lot.
another 4 or 5 of us in Canada to start the plates. So we began the project in Canada at the University of Alberta with a print team, a technical wonder, which I have to say is Stephen Dixon. He's been the technical director of the technician, at the university for 40 years, and he has been working in photogravure for 35 of those 40 years. So we reached out to him in the middle of COVID at William's request to find a studio that could work in photogravure on large scale. And Stephen was up for the challenge. And Luke Johnson, I believe he's also listening. Together they have made this seem seamless, actually. So between my husband and I, we work with Luke and with Stephen and sometimes with Alex Thompson at the university to make the plates on behalf of William. And we talk over WhatsApp and have Zoom conversations, and we try as many possible ways of making the plates and as many combinations as possible. And then all of that copper gets shipped here so that we can work with these wonderful people and William coming and going throughout the studio the entire time. So we do a number of projects, smaller projects, all of us, so that we can just get better and better once we have these bigger pieces.
So, okay, no, I'm sorry. So again, with the acetates, we use them to try and I don't know if you can hold it closer to the screen.
It's just
We
a
use
piece
it
of plastic.
to try and just mimic each and every piece such that there are no differences between the edition. So even how he wants the paper to be frayed, exposing the whites underneath. We try our best to emulate that as best as possible, such that you don't feel as though there is a difference between 1 of 20 and 20 of 20.
And this was practiced through the Triumphs and Laments project that we did a number of years ago. And on this print alone, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 sheets of paper.
And I just
some
want
of
to
it's-
reiterate scale. I mean, that's one small piece of a very large print. And, you know, just to, you know, when you're dealing with most people, when they think of photogravure, are thinking, you know, intimate scale, they're thinking smaller photography scale, you know, it's an antiquated photo process. It's not generally done at this size, and it's definitely for a single image, let alone an image that combines this many plates to this scale. And there's a difficulty in not just in making the plates so that there's consistency of tone throughout the entire image, but then being able to print them so that tonal shifts in the plate making process can be mitigated so that there's a consistency and an evenness across the whole print. So I just want to reiterate the technical challenge that you guys make look easy. So everybody listening understands that, you know, it's a huge technical feat to be able to provide an artist with that level of creative fluidity where he doesn't have to think about that stuff. So
well, and this plates, in this case, we always use this one as an example because I think there's two pieces of this particular puzzle that are enormously layered. And this particular one too, what William has done is he's added an aquatint to a second plate so that he can actually disrupt the photogravure drawing in the first place, as well as dry point. And so we try to be kind of as loose as possible in what's possible.
yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate, you're not restricting his creative potential. You're really just trying to open as many doors as possible for him.
Yeah, and I think this is the other piece of the puzzle that is quite a nice one to show. And Sbongiseni's pulled out some of the addition that I'll show you afterwards. But this is all different pieces. We do references. This was a test plate. So we printed one of his test plates in direct gravure onto a piece of ledger. We've used some of the ledgers that he has from the mines from the 1900s, early 1900s. This is hand-painted pieces of dictionary. This is a little tiny etching he did on the day because that's what felt right. Some of these text pieces are from 2020 and some of these text pieces are from 2022. So some of it is very heavy and some of it is also very uplifting. And this is all based on a drawing that William did that is as big as the actual wall over there. And so in thinking a big project, this is a very big project, very big undertaking for photogravure that's based on a very big drawing. So you get every single one of William's marks. And
right. You get a sense of the feel of his studio.
Yes, I want to let Kim talk because there's another component to this particular piece here that is over there on the wall that she's going to talk about.
I am. Okay.
Yep, you're going to.
Studio lamp?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Phil, you'll be familiar with these because I asked Phil a lot of questions while I was in the process of printing these guys. So this is kind of the beginnings, I would say, of everything that you kind of see in the space and up on the walls at the moment. This project started in 2020 when South Africa and really the world was going through like a major transition. And in the case of South Africa, we had a lockdown for over a month. How long were we locked down for? Yeah. So just over a month. That includes obviously all of the artists who we work with. So they were all in their own spaces, making their own work in isolation, William included. So William was in his own space, kind of creating work on his own. And that was kind of the beginnings of the Studio Life series that has now become a series of films. I think there's 9.
There's supposed to be 9.
It's supposed to be 9. And these are photographs. Some of them are stills taken from the films themselves. what's nice about these images is they're kind of like taken from two different vantage points, one being William's in his own studio, kind of what he's looking at, his environment. And then the other vantage point is what maybe a outsider would see if they were to step into his space kind of midway through him working on a drawing or part of the film, or just, you know, kind of working through what he would be working through in isolation. So these were the beginnings. Jill was constantly in communication with William, and when she had learned that he was working on these films, kind of suggested that, he suggested, and you know, she kind of was figuring out how can we kind of combine what you're doing in your studio, where together with what I'm doing in Canada, along with what's happening at the David Krut Workshop, and how can we kind of bring all of these different spaces and these different people and these different ideas together to form a project that spans across, you know, different continents and countries and people and capabilities. And this is really what the result is. So the plates were not made here in South Africa. They were made in, yes. Sorry, they were made in South Africa. They were not made in Johannesburg. They were made in Cape Town by Janae Warren, who is a it's
Spoken like a
when
true Joburg native, being like the rest of South Africa. You know, Joburg's the only place.
Yeah. Well, no, she's in South Africa. She's in Cape Town. She is a photogravure specialist. But when I say specialist, I mean she taught us things about photogravure that I don't know if we you taught us a whole bunch, Phil, but like Janae is like, you know, she gets into it on a whole other level. So together with Janae Warren at Warren Editions, she made the plates, and then she would proof them, send them over, and then we would proof them to show William, and then he would kind of give his he would, you know, say, I prefer this in a different color ink, or let's try some sheen clay, or you know, he would kind of guide how he wanted it to look, how he wanted it to feel. They're a lot smaller in scale, obviously, than these giant works that we're working on. So they're very intimate, but even the imagery itself is very intimate. I mean, it's really like a glimpse into his very personal studio space. So part of that feeling of intimacy comes from the ink that's used and the color paper. It's very warm. It's very kind of like, it's this inviting kind of, you feel like you're in an intimate space. Yeah, right. So that was
the way in which you printed it too. I want to point that out, because a printer with a photogravure plate has a lot of options on what to push, pull tonally in an image, how much transparency you use in an ink, how heavily or lightly you wipe an area. And so there's a lot of control that you can have, or I guess we can say a lot of options you can offer an artist. And I think one of the things that's been really great for you, Kim, and William, is to develop that rapport back and forth for printing these plates. And you've been able to give him a different way of looking at photogravure by the way you're printing it.
Yeah. Well, he also, I mean, William, like with these, what I realized, and I think what we all realized, is like his work doesn't exist in isolation. You know, if he's drawing something, or there's a performance that's linked to it, or there's a sculpture that's linked to it, or, you know, there's a whole other body of work that he's kind of working through or thinking about that feed into everything that he's doing. So he already knows kind of how he wants something to feel. So the guidance that he can give you is immediate, and he knows when something works and he knows when it doesn't. So that's very helpful in kind of guiding how an image, where it should end up and how it should look. And then obviously Jill was a big part of that. Like you were saying, you know, you get to really work with the artist and get a feel for what they like and the direction you should be going. But Jill kind of really facilitated that crossover because she's been working with William for so many years, and the way in which she facilitated the project and kind of brought us into it made that transition of us working with William a lot easier, because, you know, she kind of, yeah, she gave us, it sounds weird to say she gave us an in, because we were already in, but yeah, she facilitated that handover and guided, you know, from the get-go a lot of what we were doing, and then kind of handed over the baton in a way to say, like, okay, you guys.
I mean, I
got
would,
this.
in a lot of ways, I kind of equate it to, you know, in a print shop, there's an apprenticeship system, and it's where you spend a lot of time, and you work towards, you know, handing that baton over with different artists at different times, and so it's a natural process, that kind of evolution in it. I mean, I would say, can you show the Laocoon image really quick, because that's, to me, is a really interesting part of the, I don't know if it's on the wall, but part of the story, the Studio Life story of images. So this image, the Laocoon, has dry point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kimberly, but that's the first time he worked back into the plates for the Studio Life series.
Yeah, correct.
When talking, you know, to William about this, like, this sculpture was in the studio for maybe half of a day in relationship to the drawing on the wall. And because the sculpture was made to be sent out to be cast in bronze. And this print captured a moment, just one moment in the studio, that really, in so many ways, connects to so much of William's work with objects and shadow projection in ways that he wasn't even actually aware of until I asked him some questions for the book that we're working on, of, you know, the 30 plus years of works that David Krut's published with William. And he found it really interesting and fascinating. And I think something to point out with some of the Studio Life images is that they're records of events in his studio in a really specific period of time that actually influences and informs his own memory of things, because they become this element, this capture, right, of something that was passing, and that he was involved in lots of other things that he can go back to. And that's really, you know, one of the prints in the series too, where you can, like, started changing your relationship with William, becoming more involved one-on-one with one another, and how to move a print forward because of that addition of the dry point. So I think, you know, the Studio Life series is what created that expanding foundation, which is why you guys have jumped into doing this now at such a massive scale, right? He's gets to rely on all three of you to a much larger extent, which means he's going to get to push all three of you even more, and the work gets to be pushed. And we use that word push a lot, not in a negative way, but I think we all do it because we all appreciate the challenge.
Like, so
Expanding,
you're
yeah.
pushing an extreme or something of the sorts, more than, you know, pushing someone or forcing something. Kind of natural progression.
We do that too, but with each other. So you're gonna take us over to William's space now?
Yeah. So there's one more work. So this particular piece that's here, kind of, because we can play around with scale now and make large and small, because we're playing with photogravure and essentially a photo of even a drawing of William's or his reference collages that have been torn up and put back together, we're playing with scale. So we have a smaller work that's here that we keep calling the small garden, but it's the biggest plate. So it's actually quite a big plate, and it looks small here. But it gives you an example of just how there's torn sheets of paper, because there's a drawing version and then there's a photographic version, and we're combining them. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. And we first do it on Hahnemühle to try to figure it out. And then William's going to start to add some colored text and so on. So because the Center for the Less Good Ideas in their rehearsal period, we're not quite finished, but we'll be finishing the works in the next 10 days or so. And what we want to do, I just want to show that, because now we're going to take you through, because we could talk, all of us, collectively for a very long time.
It's a little loud because we're going into the outside world, so bear with us.
Yeah, and it's now dark, so.
And it's a Friday night.
And it's Friday, and there's Yeah, so hopefully you can actually see some.
But just to highlight for everyone, you know, where they are in this part of Johannesburg, this studio is across the courtyard from William's sculpture and theater studio. So the proximity
I
is
don't know if you can
also
see.
really great. Yeah, we can see. It looks great.
Okay, so there's the restaurant and there's a courtyard space, and then up and behind us, there's multiple levels. And down the hallway is the Center for the Less Good Idea. So we literally are 30 paces kind of from William's studio.
And Mikhail Sabatsky's studio is just
And
down the hall too. And so there's other artists that they work with who are also in this area, which is an amazing treat for any artist to have their printer literally across the courtyard. But this gives you guys a little bit of a glimpse into, you know, part of
The
William.
magic, yeah.
The magic, exactly.
So William's currently working on a series of sculptures in here, some bronzes. So we've been in here working with Louis and his team from Workhorse Foundry. So here's some of the sets for the great yes, the great no. Here's one of the, like, this is amazing. This is the ship. I will.
Oh, that's great.
It's great. This is all sandpaper. Like, it's wonderful what gets used in here. There's part of a drill, literally, all put together in here. I don't know how long Sabine and the team work on these models, but it's quite elaborate. There's a little musical box. So also those touches are just something else. And then here's the bronzes that Workhorse is doing. So they've done a series of small ones, and Kim and Sarah are actually printing another procession piece that was done in direct gravure and dry point and aquatint, actually, that are based on these figures. So these are just waxes right now, but also quite a beautiful scale.
Yeah, it's a great scale.
Where do you go?
On to fetch procession.
Okay, Sbongiseni will bring it. He'll show it to you guys.
So tell us, you know, what's going on in here and why you've needed more space to expand for being able to figure out this image.
So William sent me an image in February of this year, and he sent me a photographic image of a collage that he'd made of torn up pieces of paper of photographs from his garden. And he said, what if we made this into the next large photogravure print? And then I was traveling. I was on my way home with my family from somewhere, so I didn't see the email that day. And then the next day, he sent me the next image that was a drawing of that same garden. He said, or maybe this one instead. And I said, kind of looked at them. And I've always seen William's references. So I've had that, you know, the experience of how wonderful they are. And the last prints that he made last year were combinations of drawing and photographs that he'd collaged together, taken that photograph, and that was the next step kind of in the photogravure projects. And a small work was made. So I just said, what if we made them a little bit smaller? And we did both. And so that's why we needed this big, large wall, is we brought two prints of the reference drawing, and then we brought two prints of
Photograph.
of his actual drawing that's based on the Great Yes, the Great No, and he's combining them.
So this is, just for all of you to understand, is they're giving him essentially the base parts of the image to break apart and put back together. And because he's got this much space and because it's printed, he can infinitely push and pull, put this one on top of that, change the photographic element to be forward or behind, the drawn element to be forward or behind. And he can see them all together to figure out which is the version that needs to survive as a addition work.
Yeah, so these are all pieces of printed paper that are each layered on top of each other. So this is a polymer plate, and this piece has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers probably in here. And then some of them are very simple.
And so do you have any inkling of which one of these versions is what's going to survive?
We originally thought that we were going to have a lot more of the polymer plates in the drawing, but essentially actually what William's done is he's created two works. So we have this particular piece, this is what we're working towards in the finish. And it's not only the three of us working on this, there's the other three printers we've been steadily printing from the polymer plates to provide the green layers, and then to print the tonal polymer plates of the reference drawing in the next room, and then all of us again working as a team.
Production.
Yeah, printing the photogravure plates and trying to figure out this layering. But all again, so that's the focus of what I'm leading, while Sbongiseni is putting together the old gods next door. And while Kim is working on the procession and on that new smaller version of this garden that we were talking about, and doing
Lots of other stuff.
Lots of other stuff.
Because guys, you also have to remember, William is not the only artist that you all work with. And there are a lot of other artists too. And you're in this hyper intense period with this. And then you get to, when they finally get decided on, you get to figure out how you flow this next insane amount of work into your production schedule. And if William needs 3 more of this particular piece to figure this out, then you have to stop and make those whatever else you're working on to make sure he has what he needs.
So that's what we've done. We have 3 of all of these big works, and we are doing 2 different green bases of the work that's next door, as well as a yellow version. And we've noticed that everybody, because of this beautiful wall that William has painted, we just so happen to put the right one in the middle, but everybody is wearing green and yellow, and it's really nice to be, it's really nice to be in these gardens. And I think that's kind of,
It is. It's like a breath of fresh air. Like it's like walking through the garden merely by working on it.
yeah.
And how we try and space ourselves in terms of like projects is that we give ourselves enough time to work on this, and then after a while we stop and then try to step away and work on other artists, and then once that is done, come back. So it also gives you a sense of a new perspective whenever you come back to it. You appreciate it anew, you see things in a different light, and you tackle problems quicker because now you've had time to actually process them.
We've also all listened to William, who talks about it all the time. It's like the peripheral, everything. So we pin up as many things as possible. William has changed this work 3 times. So then we try to remember what we're supposed to do. And sometimes in that translation, it's exact. And then sometimes not quite as exact. Yeah. So I think that that's what we each learn.
He loves the fact that he is reacting to it,
Response,
and that we are responding to it as well. So that constant communication between him and us kind of like using it as a guide to make something of it is the catalyst that makes the whole piece work. The mere instance when you were asking about how Ron was the singer, how did they find that out? Is because the center initiates these activities where you get cues and you respond to those cues, and something comes from that cue, whether it be small or great, you don't know. It's just you respond.
William, we always talk about, like, if we have everything up when William walks in, he gets to respond, and that's, I think, the greatest gift. And I think that that's what collaborative printmaking is all about, that we do for every artist that we're working with, no matter what. So as you know, Phil, like we're in here every morning early. We're here late. We are working to get each of the pieces done. Today was Friday. We weren't sure if we were going to make it to the talk, because we were all. And then William came in right before the performance that's happening now and gave us the energy back that we needed, because we were not at a crux, but
we were
ready.
in a bit of a slump, but we. And William came in and he was like, "What about this? And what about this?" And we were like, "Yeah, what about that?"
Well, I think that's the addiction of the collaborative printer is to see. It's like the option. It's because you have the technical ability to show him something else, and then you get to see where that leads. And I think it's, there's an addiction to curiosity that comes with the field. And I think that's, every artist has has got that same thing as well. And I think, you know, you feed each other off of that. It's when they give you some harebrained thing to do, there's sometimes you're like, well, you're frustrated because you're like trying to figure out how to do it, but it's not, there's never a loss of curiosity. You're still going to do it. Like you want to see.
All three of us actually, so it's fine. You know, you just kind of go, okay,
Sure.
I don't know how, but okay.
Yeah. And the artist walks out the door and you confer and you're like, do anyone understand what he actually wanted right now? And, you know, everybody has to figure it out. And I think that's, you know, the beauty of printmaking is that it's a team effort, you know, and that there's more brains make everything better. And I think what's been so nice for me over the years to watch you guys evolve as a team is to see how each of your strengths play off of each other and towards each other, and the work that you do with other artists, how that feeds into another collaboration and the things you notice about each other and how you can help push that with whatever artist you're working with. I mean, I think Sbongiseni, you probably learned a great deal of what not to ever do again off of the triumphs and laments, and it's caused to make it so much easier for this.
That's my story.
We are good now. You got the-
I tell it every day. I'm like a broken record. So remember that time I carved out a face?
Well, let's not do that again. I feel like, you know, for you guys, one of the joys of having that kind of time with each other, and I think, you know, how sometimes the printers will say, wow, you know, it felt longer than a year and a half, is because your workday is longer than most people's workday. You put in way more hours.
So it you know, you're constantly trying to problem solve it. I was listening to you too on that plate mark, and you were talking about how there's those printers too who will just sit there and figure it out no matter if the project's even over.
Right.
Each of us does.
I mean, you can't turn it off.
Yeah, and I think that what COVID did, which was heartbreaking actually for us, for me, I don't know as much for these guys, but for me,
same. No, different levels. Sorry.
Yeah, so for moving spaces and holding on to the things that we each find dear, and that is why, like, we find the relationship with William dear, the relationship with David dear, the relationship with these guys, all of them dear. So we refuse to kind of think in a tight box. We have been mentored by David, by William. I have been mentored by both of them now for 20 years. So I can't think small. And now these guys
that trickles on.
think
it just keeps on.
And with me not being here, these guys, like, we're just allowed the space to keep going what they were already doing. And then when we come together, we actually, it's great. We all bring something different. And then I think we're making these big projects that are moving from different spaces so that we can also talk about the people and what it takes, how many people. Some of those projects have taken 5 years. This photogravure project, we are actually in our 3rd year. It isn't, so the large work from last year has taken a year for almost to edition the whole. That's amazing.
Monumental.
Yeah.
Hey.
So everyone's grown exponentially, I think.
Well, I mean, I think
that's
the thing to highlight that what you're saying is the most important element in all of this is the people and the relationships that people have and the respect for each other's work and contributions and the ability to give each other space to grow and to change. So there's not that rigidity that exists in your relationship as a whole with one another. And the intention is to grow, right? And the intention is to see how it grows. And I think that's something that's really rare in a lot of the world and a lot of people's lives. But I think it's what makes it work so well, especially for you three. It's like, you know, there's a shorthand that you develop when you have the respect for one another, not just as technical artist people, but as people and your perspectives. And then that ability to rely on one another, right? You know, it's the epitome of a collaboration.
And then something spontaneous happens every time. Locust Jones was here from Australia working in the studio, I think in 2013, perhaps. And he left behind a bottle of blue ink that we have had in the studio for ages. And last year when William wanted some green, Roxy mixed up an acrylic paint with this blue ink. And it's just the way that they work together and separate that actually all of those hand-painted sheets William had anything at his fingertips. So it was like that one idea kind of that just kept going. So Roxy's contribution to that leads into this. All of these greens, not necessarily this green of Williams, not saying that, but the greens that we're using, they're just based off of some of the previous projects, and we're always thoughtful like that. Every project kind of leads into the next. What Sbongiseni was showing with those torn pieces of paper. Yeah. And the texts, we finally have like so many text pieces at our fingertips. Thank you, Luke, sincerely, because that with Stephen and with Luke, that was the last batch of plates to make last year. And when etching the plates, Stephen said, we don't have enough time to etch all these plates. We have 7 left and we have half a day. We're just going to tape them onto a Perspex sheet and etch them all at once. Which I thought, of course you could do that. And so it was all done as quick as possible. So they will come to Johannesburg and these guys will come to Canada. That is all our hopes.
Yeah.
Is you just learn. It's sharing, and it's all the same
exactly
kind of people, the mindsets.
Right. I mean, I think, you know, another thing to just highlight too is your willingness to let it go where it's going to go. I mean, I like to point out that Julie said this was going to be a print, and now it's 2. And it's,
well, I saw that too, though. As soon as it was up on the wall in the studio in Saskatoon, I thought, ooh, it is 2.
But the idea, you know, a lot of people, you know, there's an idea, you stick with it, you run it through to that end versus saying, you know, the goal is a constantly moving goalpost. You know, it's where you're going to get along the way, and these are the things that become most important.
And William talks about that too. That each print has to lead you.
Yeah, but it's also telling of the artist as well to be allowing of the movements of the project and their goalposts shifting ever so slightly. Because some artists are like constrained to that idea to such an extent that they can't see any other vision like coming to light, and it to a certain degree hinders the process, hinders the project, because you can't really allow for anything else to exist even though it has the potential to be great.
Right. And I'm sure you all know that sometimes as printers we have to slowly show other things so that it becomes their idea and their goal. It's our job to kind of inch them along, being like, we know they're going to get here in 20 years, but maybe we could do it in 5 if we do.
And then you just keep it up on the wall for a while.
Long enough, you know? It's like, strategically leave this piece of paper over here, knowing eventually they're going to ask about it. And, you know, but that's our job. And I think, you know, this goes back to, you care not just about your work and each other, but you care about that artist's vision and how you can help them achieve, you know, the best and the furthest that they can go. And I think that's the role of the printers. That's the role of the publisher. I always talk about the faith that a publisher has to have, you know, in an artist, because they're going to say, okay, we're going to foot this bill for however long it takes for someone to make a decision, you know, and you're thinking, okay, it's going to be this print, it's this much money to make it, and it's going to take this much, and then it becomes 2, and then it becomes 2 years or 5 years to finish it. But it's worth it in the end because it's what needed to exist. And so, you know, everybody involved has to have the respect for one another, but also the faith, not just in the artist, but that art matters enough to care that much and take that much time. I think it's clear that matters to you all.
I think this project felt fast, but it feels on the last one, but it feels right, actually. Yeah, because our minds were all in it. All of us. Yeah.
And every project before kind of primes you for the next one, so you get faster,
quicker, faster, more productive. Radio hit. Yeah,
so you can do more work. So that's right. It's not so you get more leisure time. I want to make sure everybody understands that. It's so that you can make more work. I think, you know, that's a big part of all of our addiction when it comes to being printers. We just want to see more stuff. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. So our efficiency comes for wanting to see more.
Need to know when to slow down, because when you are so used to moving constantly, even slowing down feels wrong. It's like something's off here.
I definitely suffer from that problem.
How to calm down sometimes.
So I want to open up for questions for people in the comments. Well, there was one that came through, which was for Sbongiseni and Khulu, which was, how did you guys get involved in printmaking, and how did you get roped into the David Krut Workshop vortex? It's like, because that's I feel like anybody who walks by the studio gets sucked in, and it's a wonderful, wonderful world to get drawn into.
Well, Kim every day tells me, okay, not every day, but every time I bring up how I started as an intern, she's like, well, I did it. I was hired. Okay, fine. We're not all the same, I guess.
Can't all be that amazing.
But for me, literally, hearing about David Krut's in varsity and then studying certain projects that you guys were doing and seeing you at Art Fair, I don't think we ever like officially met, but you were in the ether. And then once upon a time, my sister happened to be around Maboneng. She was like, hey, there's this place, you should come check it out. And then she made the introduction, and then next thing I know, I'm interning here.
And then within a month, I said, David, we have to hire this. And both you guys were both went to the same university and taught by the same printmaker.
Yeah.
So they just had a feel, a sense that was much less conceptual, more actually technical and interesting and capable.
Yeah.
Truthfully, both of you guys really, really easily, really early. Everyone else except for Roxy was also higher.
Yeah.
I started as an intern.
More intern.
Yes, and you started as an intern. Chad did.
Yes.
As did Sarah.
Yes.
Actually.
Well.
Yeah.
Jesse as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, oftentimes that's the way it is, because it's a extremely intense, close environment. You got to know if you can work with each other. It's a personality thing. You got to be able to work with one another, be standing next to one another all day. It's not like you have a cubicle over here and over there and you just meet at the water cooler. You're helping each other, holding each other's paper, helping each other move stuff around. It's a constant time with one another. So it's super important that it works. It's hard sometimes. Yeah.
He likes to into a family. Like, see here, we're a family. So to a certain degree we are, because you understand each other's temperaments and how to work around each other and what buttons not to push necessarily if you know what's going on. So let's say you are stuck with a project or a medium that you're unfamiliar with. You're not going to force that person to keep on doing it if you know that that's a hindrance for them. You step in where you can, or someone else needs to take over. It's just what it is. You understand each other, your strengths, your weaknesses, and how to make the project keep flowing.
And there's a lot of skill sharing as well, because we're not all good at everything, although we can do everything, but like we kind of each specialize in the things that we're really good at, and we can like teach each other how to be better in something that we're maybe not very strong at. So we exchange skills and we teach each other. I mean, I think people have this idea that we know everything and that we just can do it. But what we're actually doing is like we're learning from each other all the time.
Yeah.
And we're also learning from our artists, because our artists also teach us by pushing us or asking us to do things that we maybe haven't done before. So it's like constantly learning from each other, and not all personalities kind of gel in that way, where you're willing to learn or willing to exchange information and skills. Some printers don't do that at all. They like keep their secrets to themselves. But like in our space, we're constantly sharing and learning.
That also comes from Phil.
Yeah.
So that comes from you, Phil, and also from years for me where no one would actually share. So I had to learn a lot on my own, and then finally you came and told me that I was doing some things okay. And that's, at the time, yes. So it's like
I mean, I think it's really important. I also want to highlight that you're saying we might not be good at that. Your level of not good is still a mastery level. I just want to point out. I mean, when you guys are like, "Well, I'm not that great at that," it's still such a high level that your variance of mastery understanding is so much higher than other people, and that's why people come in to work with you. You know, it's because they see the work you've done, they understand the bar of quality that you maintain, and they know that they'll be taken care of. And so that, you know, that freedom, that lifelong learning sort of capability that you all have is it's what is inviting to an artist, right? It's that you're open, right? You're not closed off. You're not like, nope, this is how you do it, and this is the way it's going to be done. And it's your all willingness to not necessarily be great at something the first time you try it, but to get great at it by the time it's necessary to be great at it. I think that's the thing that carries through, and it's, you know, it's one of the things that, you know, having worked with David for so long too, it's his faith and understanding. I watched him hire people who may only stay a few years, but they go on to do other things, and give them responsibility greater than what they think they can handle. I think that's kind of the standard that's set, especially in that studio, is that having faith in person to be able to get to the place, not necessarily that they have to be there when they start. And I think you
find people with a lot of
with potential, and it's just to give it a chance, you know. And I think the artists come in and they feel that from you, that's your core as a collaborating printer, is that you're going to see their potential, and they'll actually, you can bring them up to your expectations of them, and then they can push you to greater expectations as well. It's where that push pull comes through.
And also David's keeping the studio open, so it's open to whoever comes into the studio. So that is not the norm, and that takes a lot of patience and, you know, willingness to be able to share while you're doing something extremely technical. So I want to
reiterate what open means, what she's saying, just in case people don't understand. It means literally anyone off the street can walk in the door question while they're doing something, like somebody's literally under an 8-foot piece of paper while another person's, you know, cranking a press, and then somebody walks in off the street and says, so what are y'all doing in there? And, you know, but it's that openness in the environment that I think comes with printmaking. I think, and when you embrace it, it's what brings more people into the arts, because they get to see it made and they can talk to people like you. And David and I have often commented that the best way to sell a print is to let someone see it being printed, because they understand, they're a part of it at that point. And I think that open door policy of your studio, which yes, is extraordinarily rare, is also one of the things that, you know, creates such a wonderful environment for everyone involved, not just you guys, because, you know, when your work is done, then the audience's job begins. You know? So it's
it's enabled some of these magical pieces of Williams to become performance pieces, essentially. So when there's any number of visiting curators from overseas, they get the opportunity to come in and to take a look. We're putting it together for them. And in COVID, it was taking it to the next extreme, where the team here printed the Triumphs and Laments and they shipped them to me in Vancouver, and I worked on that particular piece in situ so that people could experience what we all have created here and what we live with, what we know. Yeah. So it's sharing.
And I just want to, you know, David started off in his journey in the arts and in printmaking not knowing that much, and it was generous printmakers willing to educate him, generous art dealers to educate, that, you know, open that door for him. And I think, you know, one of the things that's I can easily say is that has been a part of his mission, is to keep that door open for others, to pass that along, to pass that knowledge along, pass on that opportunity to learn along. And a print shop is one of the few windows the outside world can have into an artist's creative process, because you can see behind you. William's entire thought process is on the wall behind you. You can look from one piece to another, see how one mark changed, how one color changed, and see where it ended up. And it's very rare to get that sort of a glimpse into an artist's creative process, which is far more engaging than, you know, going into a museum and you just see finished work. And it's, you know, now it's just your relationship, your history to it, versus getting to see some of that artist's thoughts and understanding, you know, point A to point B. And, you know, it's very rare in the visual arts to get to see any of that at all, unless someone's making a stop motion film of themselves making a painting. But in print, you get that. And I think the openness of the studio is really, it's so rare. And it's something I think that, you know, hopefully more people emulate, moving forward is allowing
But
it. I
like-
mean, printers are fairly anal retentive, so I can understand why they don't like to do it. So,
Something you have to learn. Like,
Yeah.
I remember very early on, I would get frustrated. I'm like, I'm in the middle of something. I don't want to engage. But then as time goes on, you get good at doing both. You get,
And sometimes other people step in.
yeah,
We can read
exactly.
each other. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're not okay one day, someone else will step in and
Yes.
take over.
Yeah.
And Kim's
Right.
often in the corner. So she can do it. And she's often printing and editioning.
right
So-
off to the side, and but I think that
It's just the unlucky position of that big table.
exactly, whoever's out there is getting it first. I've had people ask me before while printing, or even there. I remember I was there one Sunday. We're working on a big Deborah Bell plate. I think it was for Parsifal. These giant plates. The plates are almost the same size as Kinley, almost this tall. I think they're about your size. And
both Kib and Sbongiseni edition those.
yeah, and they were big, and I was in the middle of like moving one of these plates, right? So it's a massive plate, and somebody walks in the door, and they're like, and one of them, the question from the husband was, "Is there a sandwich shop here?" And the question from the wife was, "Are you busy?" And I'm like, "I got this thing, it's giant." But 40 minutes later, they were taking information down to come back and look at more of Deborah's work, right? Because if you actually engage someone who has absolutely no clue what you're doing, in 40 minutes of time, you can turn them into a super fan because they just got to see this thing printed. They're like, what is this? And you can talk and crank at the same time. So I think that's a really wonderful part of, a workshop environment, is that it's naturally communal and it's naturally an education space. So I feel like you guys really, you really take that to its top level, not only making the highest level work, but also having an extraordinarily open feeling and capability. So I'm just going to throw out there, anyone who is in Johannesburg should come by the studio. This is your invitation to come say hello. You now know some faces that you can say hello.
and I think part of that come in. I often tell myself, imagine if this is their one opportunity to be in Johannesburg, in Arton, Maine, and see the space. They'd want to have a memory to take with them. And it's a much more fun and engaging memory if they get to know more about the space and what we do than if they just walk in and no one talks to them and they walk out.
Well, and I also have to say, as a publisher and a promoter of prints, the best way to promote the industry and sell prints so that artists can keep making prints is to create walking billboards for prints and arts. And every person who walks in there has a positive experience, is now telling anyone and everyone they've ever met. Their photographs are being shown and they're saying, these people are crazy, it's amazing. And they are the best advertising you can ever possibly have as a person who is inspired and willing to engage with others. And that's, ultimately at the end of the day is, you guys can spend all this time doing this amazing work, but if people don't buy it, people don't know about it, it doesn't allow you to keep doing it and, have that tradition being passed on. More people get to be brought up. You won't have any more interns to take your job. So I was an intern too, so okay. I was not hired. So so that's how it can work. Oh, David is actually on and would like to say something here. Let me unmute David there. Sorry, David.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Sorry, joined. Hi, guys. Good to see you. It's just a universal archive of activities. That's so great, listening and catching up, and also. But what's exciting is the new dimension, Phil, and maybe you can give some guidance, because what's been amazing is how everybody skills developed as printers, and then ideas and originators, and now they're moving into the field of being the publisher. Like we rely on the printers to invite young artists and who come in and I think both Kim and Sbongiseni, actually all of you have worked with these new young artists who have a university training with Meeting University, and they so then left in a way not quite out to dry, but where do they go? And they maybe have a success with a first degree show. So this is another exciting thing that I think is for the printers now to fast track helping other artists, which is what they're doing. These are artists at various levels, but what advice can you give in terms of how you entice an artist to know or help them know that a printmaking activity is something that's forever, and that the relationship with the printer is really such a strong collaboration, and it's in so much in their interests, but also a lot in terms of the confidence as they have developed, as I say, into the origination. The idea of origination, in other words, how does one really go about in your ideas with someone who's made some work, but now you want to help them originate something new?
I mean, to answer that question in a short way, for a lot of younger artists, I think one of the most important things to highlight is that virtually every major artist in the last 500 years in the Western art tradition has done printmaking in a serious way. That it's been a very important part of their creative output. And you just start naming artists. Like, name an artist that you like to a young person, and most likely they've done a lot of prints. And it's that entrance into then having a conversation on why prints have been important to so many artists for so long. And most of it has to do with that relationship that they've developed with their printers, or they've done the printing themselves. And it's that feedback you get. It's how much more quickly you can move your own creative process along. You can evolve your ideas because you're not acting in isolation. And it helps teach younger artists that working in isolation is a detriment to your ability to actually achieve your goals, both artistically, creatively, as well as a career. That you need other people. You can't go it alone. And a print shop is a really great way to learn a lot more in a much shorter period of time. Because if you come in and you work with these guys, you're not getting just a printer's perspective. You're getting their understanding, every artist they've worked with, all of those different ways of seeing the world, all of those different ways of solving creative problems, all in one shot. And so what you're getting is all of those artists' experience is being applied to you, and it allows you to evolve so much faster. So when you think of someone like Aldo Cromlech, who's the famed printer who apprenticed under Roger Courier in France, and he started working with Picasso at a young age and became Picasso's primary printer, and then moved to New York to work with all of these American artists. But they're getting all of that experience, and that printer, all that perspective is being applied now to their work. And I think it's often discounted, that amount of cumulative knowledge that the printers retain. So between you three, there's an insane amount of wisdom that's in your hands and in your hearts and in your minds. And any artist who comes into your studio is the beneficiary of all of that wisdom. And any younger artist who gets an opportunity like that, they don't feel it right away, they're likely not going to have a career in arts. They're not going to understand it. It's just
so how do you suggest they deal with a sort of crossover? So much is sort of digital or film. Most of the graduates coming in did as much as they could in the print shop, but the other mediums is maybe how they're seen they can generate income. But how do you see this interaction between the digital crossover with, have you discovered any ways of a piece of paper sort of addressing both of those great resources in some way, or how else?
I just look at it as another tool, and I go back to the artists that are going to make the greatest cultural contributions are the ones that have the greatest curiosity. And I think that's the underlying element. It's really not the media they work in, the tools they use. It's that natural curiosity and that, burning desire to have to share what it is their perspective is, what they want to know. And then it's just everything else is just another tool. I mean, I often joke that, I live in the 19th century, I can fix any 19th century tool that there is in a print shop. And, I don't have a whole bunch of digital printers in my shop, but I have a whole bunch of amazing digital technicians at a grasp, where I am. I've got people who can photograph stuff and digitally print stuff and make film and do all those things. I don't have to have those tools in my studio. I have to have that collaborative ability to work with others, right? And
that's
I think that's what it boils down to.
Is that there's so many people, and people keep saying, how do you juggle all these many people? But it's like, we've each of us have made different series of works, and each of us thinks in such a big way from all of these projects, and then learning from all these different people. So we're all trying to be as collaborative as possible, which I think, David, is like the strength all the way through. I think a lot of artists can see it, absolutely see it. And I think with having the open door in the studio, people are just blown away. So the ebb and the flow, I think, is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, and I think
there's so many artists that when they walk in the door, they don't leave. So
That's true.
yeah. Now, if you work with 60 artists and now there's one more that walks in the door, now you work with 61 artists, even with Deborah.
Yeah.
They saying, what's happening? Where are you guys? What is going on? I'm coming back next year. Here we go. So, it's and I think it's also been a wonderful generation of art supporters, print shops now. David Krut Workshop's it's 20 years last year. And it's the artist proof studios and the artist press. And you just have all these patrons in the arts who've led the way. And now I think we kind of keep moving forward. I think a lot of the artists too have been making.
That's it. It's one of the most difficult things we're doing is trying to help create an awareness throughout the New York base to all the great work that's going on at the workshop. And in a way, the American audience sort of understanding of print is more digital and, things that you're used to seeing, I suppose, on your telephone screen, rather than, you might say, these pretty intense black and white images. So I never forget Dick Solomon at Pace saying that we're the only publisher he knows that are able to sell black and white images. So I don't know, where does color come into it? How do we can't make work for an audience.
I think
the point is, do we begin to, I think there is color coming into the work. Guys, where do we bring color into what you do these days?
I mean, I guess I want to jump in on that one and kind of use some of your own medicine against you on that one, because I think it's really believing in the artists and making great work is step one, but step two is being willing to show it to people and share it with people. And I think, what you did in the early days of your print publishing was take it door to door, like physically put it in front of people. We can show people digital images all day, but the minute you get to put it physically in front of people, and I think that's the difference, and is finding the way to get it in front of people as an actual thing. The digital reality divide is what's physical. A physical experience, it can't be matched in any other way, those primary experiences. And so, when you get somebody in and they look at a print and they can either handle it or they can actually get close to it, it's really different than stuff, behind glass, or, with a museum rope, you can't get within 10 feet of it. The experiences are just so different. And I think the real key is, in this day and age, is how you get people to slow down enough to have a real experience, right? To actually be present with something. And I think, the stories that surround it, the ways in which all the people are involved, those things are intriguing, right? And you have the information to be able to share. So the key with printmaking is we've been involved in it from its idea through its development, through its completion. That's a huge story to share. So to me, it's more about how you engender storytelling to produce, real experiences in the flesh with either print shops and or prints and or people, right? You know, that you use it to create those real interactions. That's the most important thing. And so that's the hard work in a lot of ways. It's actually the hardest.
Can you tell us the plans you've got now for your own workshop? Because this is pretty exciting, and you know, relocating, and I can see you're really well set up there.
Yeah. Well, what you got, I mean, just like what's over there is that's all color testing. Like Jill was showing color testing. That's just two different projects. So it's Jacob Hashimoto on the left and James Sienna on the right. And you know, I think one image, James just left yesterday. He was down here for a week. And one of the images that we finished, we had 9 different color proofs. Like, and I don't mean just like subtle, I mean like wild variations of color proofs of just the one image, and we were working on 5. And so, you know, for me, it's the same thing. I'm entering a phase where, you know, coming out of pandemic, setting up a new shop here, becoming more public. You know, it's just as I was saying, you know, more invitation into the studio, more events in the space, more outreach for people to have physical experiences and even more intimate experiences with the arts. Because I think, you know, as we've talked about, you know, when someone walks into your workshop there in Johannesburg, they get a one-on-one conversation with the person who knows more about it than anyone else, the producers of it. And that is so rare and it's so unique, and you've got to be pretty dead inside as a person not to respond to that in a really positive way, to not be moved by that. And so for me, it's, you know, that's the phase I'm shifting to. You know, I do a lot of outreach stuff. For me, it's really important to educate people about print, and even to help inspire other printmakers to be more open about what they do, to open their doors a little bit, because that's how we create a vital and vibrant industry, and that's how you keep that industry rolling, you know. And so I think, you know, perspectives like you and I have, David and Jill, like what we're doing now in Canada as a publisher, those ideas are what allows the field to survive. Because people have been asking me about, you know, how do we deal with this? And I was like, collaboration. The more we work together, the more that will happen. The better industry we'll have. Artists will be supported. Our workshops will be supported the more we work together. To me, it's like, it's our core of what we do. We have to extend out beyond just our relationship with our artists. We extend that to collaborate with collectors, collaborate with institutions and other print shops and other technicians. I think the more we physically connect ourselves together, the better it all works. I think that's really the key. That's my focus.
I'm just trying to picture, do you think it'll ever be a stage where you'll have a plate on the bed and you'll have an artist in Zoom directing you and you're pulling proofs, and, you know, instead of them coming, they're sort of, you know, that could all happen long range.
I already have it
on the plate on behalf of the artist. You become a surrogate of the artist. Maybe that might be a way of things happening.
I mean, I already am doing work that way, but the artist will always, and myself will always say, there is no substitute for physically being there. Sometimes you just can't. And sometimes, you know, and there are things that you can do from a distance. You know, what we used to send in the mail that would take a long time to get back. Like I just overnighted some stuff to Jacob Hashimoto for him, because we're proofing an image right now. You know, I think we're up to
letters in the mail, Phil. That's how I
Pardon?
started looking at it. It's like writing letters. It's like once upon a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I think there's something quite wonderful about that.
Exactly. So, I mean, I just popped these films for Jacob to make additions to an image, because this amazing thing happened when we were proofing, which we ended up with this color combination we didn't expect, because it's a mixture of litho and screen print. And a lot of times the screen print doesn't let as much lithography show through, but the way we printed it let these other colors happen. And it was like, oh, so I, you know, Zoom Jacob, I'm showing it to him and we're talking about it. He's like, yeah, I want to add more of this underlayer to make more of that happen, because it's absolutely beautiful. So I just pop all of his Mylars and his drawings in a tube. He's getting them this morning, and he'll work on them and he'll send them back.
About it all, actually. And I think that it also has everything to do with a little bit of headspace and time.
Yeah.
And I think that work doesn't have to be as rushed as it once felt like. And so if you take the time to actually sit with the work, and now this particular work we've been sitting with for a while, and then it changes, and then you sit with it again, and then you work on the next thing and you sit. And I think that that's actually what's super important right now.
And a lot of artists are craving that time.
We are all three of us going to the Center for the Less Good Ideas piece, their showcase tonight, and it's the last one, and we've missed it. So we don't want to rush this. We could talk for a really
Okay.
Well, we got to let you all go.
3 minutes.
Well,
And
Phil,
we have
just one thought though, you know, is if once you've got a base plate or the basic matrix and you're pulling proofs as you're sending Jacob these various state proofs that you've done, if he makes direct marks onto the paper and says, okay, I'd like you to emulate that onto the plate yourself, does that sound viable? I mean, in the case of William, we'd almost have to use a tool that he would have used to do it. But do you think that might be a way to go in terms of?
I mean, just to answer it quickly, I mean, the easiest way is we have the digital technology. This helps us. He can make that mark on the print. I can scan it, and I can take the mark off, and then so I don't even have to translate it.
That's great.
Right. So
Okay.
I always keep the artist's hand as the most present thing possible, and them involved. But I do want to respect your guys' ability to get to this performance.
Yeah, we are on our way. If anyone has a last question or anything, like, we're very happy to answer that, and then we're going to scoot out the door, because it's an absolute pleasure. Like, really, always, like, we could talk for hours.
And of course, Phil, you know how indebted we are to you, and I keep saying that because your visits, I think with about half a dozen, just made it into a workshop. The fact we opened a workshop without any printers, and we really struggled. And there were a lot of people who came by who couldn't get it right. But when you came by, you just ooze confidence. I've never seen you unable to deal with a problem. And I'm always a great admirer of what you do.
Well, that's very flattering. I'm probably being seen blushing right now. I mean, I
Take it easy,
can say
guys.
the same back for you guys, because I remember the first time I walked into the studio, I think in 2008, in the old space, and I had gotten off a plane, went straight to the workshop, and we worked till 3 in the morning, I think it was. Set up a new plating tank, got everything ready because there was an artist coming in the morning. And like I literally, I'd flown, I had got to Cape Town, and from Cape Town to Johannesburg from New York, and so I'd been in transit for at that point I think 26 hours, and we just worked till like 3 o'clock in the morning to get it ready. I think that what I appreciated was I came in with that, and the response was, all right. It wasn't, well, we can do that tomorrow. It was, we want this. And so for me, it's just a matter of time. You would have gotten there with or without me. I feel like I can help you get there a little faster. That's been great, but it's been wonderful for me too, because it's not every day you get to work in environments where people appreciate it in the same way you do. And it's been really great to watch all you guys, get better at printing than I have. Very awesome. So, that's always the goal. It's the old Japanese teacher's adage that you're a failure as a teacher if your students don't surpass you. So to me, I'm constantly in awe of what you guys are capable of doing, what you are doing, the ideas that you're bringing forward. It's an amazing treat for me to get to be on this side. You guys.
Well, let them go off. But Phil,
yes,
but Phil, tell me about what your plans are for coming up to New York and your participation at the print fair. Giving some talks.
I'll give a couple things on air here, and then I'll pop off, and David, you and I we can talk later. But
we'll catch.
Yeah, for those of you who are unaware of what's going on,
Cheers,
next week is it's what's called Print Week in New York City. It's the International Fine Print Dealers Association, or IFPDA's big print fair in New York. And they've been doing a lot of great online events for all of the month of October, and there'll be a lot of wonderful talks with artists and curators coming up next week. The fair opens on Thursday and runs through the weekend. I will be hosting a few tours. I think there might be a few spots available. For the last maybe 10, 15 years, 15 years, I've been giving a master printer's perspective of the work. So I need people around.
Yeah.
It's the best to me. I love this fair because it's like walking into the back room of a museum. You get to see old master work, hyper contemporary stuff. I mean, it's art from all over the world. It's pretty phenomenal. And these, on that opening day, there's a lot of museums who are scrambling to try to get stuff. That's the level that everything is at. So it's really special. I'll be doing a talk on next Saturday. I think it's the 27th or the 20th, whatever that Saturday is of next week. at 4 p.m. with Nadine Ornston, who's the chief curator of prints and drawings at the Met. And we're going to be talking about print publishing, past and present, what's changed and what hasn't. That's going to be a lot of fun. I love
On Zoom too, right? For anyone
That-
listening.
Yep, that'll be on that. Yeah.
And then
And-
Mark and Kim Berman also did one of the Zoom sessions actually that will be on the website, I think, for the PDA soon.
Yeah, they archive all of those conversations, so anyone can go back and listen to those. And I encourage people to come to that fair because it's a very unique art experience. There's a lot of artists that are there, and print people are the most approachable people in the art world. So everyone standing in those booths knows an insane amount of what's hanging on those walls and so much more, and they are very happy to talk to you about it. So go in with questions ready to go. I mean, every time I go in, I'm always learning new things, and so I use my tour as kind of a roundabout way to get to learn more. So I will find works that I don't know as much about or know anything about, or an artist, so I can get the dealer there or the publisher there to talk about it, because I get to learn a lot. So for me, it's an amazing amount of fun to get to go see what's being made right now, what has been made. Sometimes people bring out gems from 30, 40, 50, or 500 years ago. It's really unique. So I encourage anyone to go. So that's all happening next week. And then I'll be doing another Zoom, book club Zoom. I'll do a tour of my studio and what's been going on here, because people keep asking about that, and what the space looks like and things like that. So the print geek stuff. I'll show you some crazy stuff. James Sienna was just here. That's what I was saying. He's working on lithography projects, so stones, plates, and we're almost done with a few. He's going to come back probably in about a month and a half before he takes off for France for 6 months next year to finish those works. But yeah, so I'll show you guys stuff. Check what I've been working on with Chikai Booker, Tech Hashimoto, all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of, Heather Gwen Martin, we did some nice prints for her earlier. So yeah, there's lots of different. I'm going to say goodbye to you guys and say thank you to everyone.
Michael, we'll see you in New York next week.
I'll give you a shout, David. We'll make some time to get together.
Perfect. Bye, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone,
Cheers,
for
guys.
coming.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.